the most interesting markets at the moment. No doubts the Middle East is certainly a fascinating market for some. Highly, highly positive in its direction for fitness and well-being. No shortage of capital, both local and international, moving into that marketplace. I would say there's a huge increase of international investment into that marketplace as foreign companies look to grow in that market as first mover advantages. And so I think Middle East has certainly got a really interesting space going forward.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Chrissy Van. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. On today's episode, I'm joined by Ross Campbell, founder of Beyond Activ. With a rich background in health, fitness, and business, Ross has been instrumental in building networks that connect industry leaders worldwide. From co-founding the world's largest energy B2B network to launching successful fitness ventures in Asia, Ross has a deep understanding of the global fitness landscape. In this episode, we'll explore the evolving role of fitness centers in healthcare, the impact of GLP-1 medications, and the rise of AI in our industry. We'll also discuss global trends and get an inside look at the upcoming Beyond Activ event in New York. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. Plus, each week we launch a new episode of This Week in Fitness. Designed for busy executives, it's where we crunch the latest fitness business headlines all in under 5 minutes. I'm your host, Chrissy Van, and this is ATFW. I am so thrilled today to have Ross Campbell joining me. This is a face that many in the industry are familiar with, and you do incredible work with Beyond Activ, really uniting the industry, making sure that we're on the pulse of the latest trends and innovations. So Ross, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Chrissy. Great to be here at the ATFW. I hope that you're well, and I'm looking forward to this good conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, particularly, I'm glad that you were able to sneak away with some time because I know you're just weeks away from your event in New York City. So kind of off the hop here, tell people when it's taking place and what can be expected.
Yeah, we've got a great event happening next month over the 17th to 19th at New York at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square in New York. It's a large business-to-business investment business conference. We talk health, innovation, and fitness, and wellness, technology, and investment. It's a great group of operators, suppliers, and investors that come together. They learn, they share, they grow, and I'm looking forward to some great connections physically and obviously some fantastic information to share on site.
Yeah, it's really incredible when you get that hive mind together, because something that we talk about here on the podcast so often is that there is a massive segment of the market that many of us aren't even speaking to. That 80% that everyone talks about getting into health clubs. There's so much innovation happening in that intersection of health club, healthcare, which I know will be addressed, and the investment sector, because the industry is growing and the recovery has been so fantastic to watch. But before we dive into some of those little subsets, I'm curious about yourself, because how do you go from sports med psychology and then end up B2B in the energy sector? What happened there?
Yeah, it's a good journey. I'm happy to talk about it. Look, we initially started doing business-to-business events for biosciences and life sciences when I first moved to London. I moved quickly into the commodities market, and so we started to run a lot of large-scale investment events for oil and gas, metals and mining. We then formed our own company that looked at oil and gas investment events, and we ran those across the globe. It was a fascinating marketplace, Chrissy. I mean, multi-billion-dollar deals, some amazing connections and one-on-one meetings. But it was a little bit purposeless in the whole sense. I wanted something a little bit more driven towards health and well-being. So we ended up selling that company, selling our interest back to the shareholders. I then bought a gym, which was both a blessing and a curse at the same time. It was not an easy baptism of fire into the marketplace, but it did give me the initial idea then to start a Fit Summit, which then became Beyond Activ, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've appreciated so much on my journey into the fitness industry is almost everyone I speak to at the executive level and beyond really has a rooted why this industry is what they want to work in. And truthfully, it does impact people's lives, and it's something that you can feel good about. But when I was doing a bit of research on yourself, talking about when you started Fit Summit, it's because you noticed a fragmentation in the industry. And one of the things that's been really interesting to watch, especially post-COVID, are people getting behind this united front. So can you talk to me a little bit about the evolution or uptick that you have seen from what's traditionally a competitive industry into what seems to be now shifting to a lot more idea sharing?
Yeah, I think when we initially formed Fit Summit, there was definitely two camps of thought, Chrissy. One of those was the competitively minded, and the other was the collaboratively minded. I think since the pandemic, there's been a huge shift towards collaboration, both in terms of data, ideas, best practice, innovation, route to suppliers, and of course, route to customers. And I think that's a really, really interesting positive to come out of the pandemic. I think from the pandemic as well, what we've also saw is that kind of gradual disintegration of the barriers that kept a lot of our markets in the separate silos. So fitness was in its own vertical, healthcare, wellness, well-being, spa, leisure and recreation. They were all pretty much their own associations, their own business networks, their own events. And we're kind of seeing that all crumbling as people want to be seen as being these more holistic businesses. So I think, I don't want to mention the C word too much, but moving out of that pandemic, there was definitely some positives, and understanding that our industry is much more joined, synchronized and collaborative. I think those are definitely good positives.
And on that positive note, we have been seeing this incredible resurgence in the space, everyone returning back to that in-club experience. And to your point, they're really enhancing their offerings on site. You're somebody that, because of your events in particular, gets to get a good temperature check on what's happening from a global perspective. So when it comes to the financial health of the industry, what are your thoughts on where we're at in this resurgence? And are there any particular global markets that are exciting you the most?
Yeah, I think it's a real mixed bag. I think there's definitely been some pain in the marketplace, and especially the markets that were, I suppose, more closed up for a longer period of time. And I take, for example, China and Japan. Both of those markets were terribly damaged and had extensively long closures through the pandemic. As a result, there was a huge decline when the pandemic was taken away. That the industry did suffer a lot. I think overall, I think a lot of the companies have had real stress tests on their balance sheet. A lot of them take out loans, and I think a lot of them came out the pandemic expecting a real hockey stick upturn in the market dynamics, and they were a little bit, I would say, disappointed in how the sentiment rose. So I think a lot of markets, there's a lot of companies at the moment who are, I wouldn't say heavily in debt, but they're not necessarily ready for a second black swan event. I think some companies have weathered the storm very well. And to your earlier point, they've made really good progress in adapting to new market dynamics, bringing on new customers, adding new ancillary revenue services, updating their membership models. And as a result, they're very, very strong. And so I think it's a really mixed bag in terms of where the marketplace is in terms of financially. Obviously, when it comes to investor capital, it's quite a tough marketplace at the moment in time. It's difficult to find capital, certainly the right investors at the right valuation at the moment in time. And so I think from a long-term capital perspective, unless you're a larger player that can maybe perhaps rely on some good debt finance, it is going to be tough for startups to continue to gain equity investment going forward. But I suppose where there's a will, there's a way, and we obviously hope those companies move forward. I suppose coming back to the second part of your question, the most interesting markets at the moment, no doubts the Middle East is certainly a fascinating market for some. Highly, highly positive in its direction for fitness and well-being. No shortage of capital, both local and international, moving into that marketplace. I would say there's a huge increase of international investment into that marketplace as foreign companies look to grow in that market as first mover advantages. And so I think Middle East has certainly got a really interesting space going forward. I think, honestly, North America, the USA for particular, it is a hugely dynamic market. It is taking all the first step advantages with the likes of GLP-1s, health club adaptations, the integration of medi spas. And so I think the US is leading the way again when it comes to innovation and investment in the market.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you can't go a day on LinkedIn or Google in this industry and not see GLP-1, something that's a topic of conversation. And I've just found it so fascinating to watch this rapid consumer appetite as well when it comes to something like this. The fact that it's become a dinner table conversation for a lot of people in a very short span of time. So from your perspective, the fitness industry dabbling in the space, we've obviously seen some big players lead the way. But what are your thoughts as we continue throughout even the next year of how this may shift in the adaptation and integration within fitness spaces throughout the United States?
Look, I think the US is leading the way, but outside of the US, I think we have to be cognizant that there's actually very little in the way of GLP-1s being invested into that marketplace. At the moment, to your point, that intersection of pharmaceuticals, medicine, healthcare, and fitness is one that we have to look at on a daily basis. The likes of Lifetime and Equinox and others are making huge inroads in that marketplace. I think as it opens up the consumer base, as those consumer base then have to understand how they can incorporate and adapt fitness into their overall health journey going forward, I think that's going to unlock an enormous amount of customers for the US. I think with the data that we actually get from from those customer sets, if the government and the industry can somehow capture that and that can then be used globally, it would be a really interesting benchmark for other countries to say, actually, we should now be adopting a more kind of wider framework of GLP-1 usage across the marketplace. And within that, of course, how does the commercial and non-commercial fitness and wellness market benefit from that as well? But the US is the guinea pig at the moment in time. And I think it's going to be a lot more positives than it is negatives.
Yeah, because I mean, to your point, I'm based in Canada. And so oftentimes when I cross the border, let's say I'm staying at a hotel and the TV's on, I'm always a bit astounded over how many advertisements I see for pharmaceuticals. And it's just part of the culture. It's very ingrained and accepted. But in other parts of the world, a little bit less so, a little bit less in your face. So on that note with GLP-1, when you look at these different fitness markets, is there the same level of awareness, or are there a lot of markets that you feel haven't even really touched or scraped the surface of this?
I would say they haven't touched the surface of it at all, Chrissy. And look, I think, GLP-1s are just one of the kind of many hormone therapies out there at the moment in time. I think when it comes to how do you address hormone therapies with inside fitness, of course, you get HRT, you then got likes of women's menopause, etc. So these are also very interesting boundaries that I think the fitness and wellness industry is just starting in its journey to understand how it can really push into those markets in a positive manner. So I think externally from the US, a lot of these are very, very new formats. I think as well, maybe another interesting dynamic over the next couple of years is how adoptive are, let's just say, the traditional general practitioner or general medical doctor in actually looking at some of these solutions in the marketplace and prescribing them to their customers as solutions. And I don't know if that's going to be a slow burn or a fast burn outside of the US, given that these are not really a huge commercial driver yet externally.
Yeah, it's going to be really one to watch because, to your point, it's unlocking, I think, the missing piece of the puzzle that the industry's had for so long. The industry as a whole, I think, has done a fantastic job rebranding their messaging, that whole mental, social, physical health dynamic. Gone are the days of the endless shredded ab things that excluded most of the populace and, dare I say, shamed a lot of people from even walking in the door. But now that middle barrier being broken, and then the fact that this is something that I think pairs well with the fitness industry. It seems like every business is trying to figure out how they can get some of those dollars because obviously the space is growing and the projections are quite insane by 2030. That being said, you have to educate not just the consumers, but also healthcare providers to be doing some of those referrals. And to your point, I know that many in the industry are making those inroads. So I'm sure that there's going to be many conversations about it at Beyond Activ. But another one that you mentioned is the technology side of things. And I know another conversation that we can't not see is artificial intelligence. But what would you say are some of the more granular aspects of AI that are exciting for the fitness industry in particular?
Yeah, I was actually just off a phone conversation earlier on about this. It is a difficult game for someone to play from the front end of the company to the back end of the company. You've got kind of, I suppose, content provision. So the use of AI when it comes to writing content generation, whether that's blogs, newsletters, promotional emails, to members and prospective customers. That's a very interesting dynamic going forward at the front end. Of course, then you also have AI-driven chatbots, which again is another kind of really interesting automation tool to go forward. At the back end, of course, then you've got naturally your CRM systems, your retention systems, your financing systems, and automation billing systems. Now, getting all these aligned in terms of, does an operator today have to use AI across their entire business? Ideally, yes, in the future, I suppose, if you're a large player. But if you're an SME player at the moment, Chrissy, how do you use AI across every one of your functions? You just might not have the capability or the headcount or the resource or the bandwidth to actually make it work all across there. But what's most interesting, I think, to your question is the amount of opportunities going forward in the next couple of months, couple of years, where you do have the opportunity to leverage AI, whether that's front end, back end, perhaps even in your personal training programming to your members, applications on your nutrition or white app labeling through nutrition advice. There are so many intersections of AI and the traditional fitness consumer and fitness business. So watching that unlock itself in the next couple of years is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so many different things happening in the space. And obviously, in the short term, a lot of people doing that adaptation merely to solve the issue of labor shortages and the capabilities. If you're able to find tools that mitigate some of those stresses, the timing really couldn't have been better.
I think the technology is there if we want to use it. I think there is so much technology just now being flung into operators' hands, whether that is AI-driven technology, CRM systems, retention software, digital fitness, connected fitness, wearable technology being driven into the members' hands. Then, of course, you've got your front-facing app. As an operator, it is quite a daunting concept to try and actually map out a full tech stack in terms of what you're actually creating, both for your business and for your consumer at the front end and the back end. So I have a lot of sympathy for the technology, for the operator at the moment in time. It's a very complicated technology puzzle to try and solve. And I think once you get in their shoes, as many operators watching this will have been, you know that you can't just turn on or turn off a technology software. You're normally invested in that software or that SaaS platform or package for at least 1 or 2 years. And so making those right calls and those right judgments is so important.
Yeah, I just was witnessing a local brand here going through a transition, just like you're speaking to. And like anything, when you're integrating on large scale, generally things don't always go seamlessly, and it can cause not just a stress for the operator themselves, but different members of your teams, their roles changing, having to invest in that re-education. But to your point, once they kind of get through those pain points, the differences that we see on the other sides are going to be quite tremendous. Obviously, those trends that we speak to, though, when it comes to the GLP-1s, the AIs of the world, intersection of healthcare and health club, these are sentiments now that have been milling around for a couple of years, but you are someone that is really on the pulse of the global perspective. So what future trends are you hearing about that perhaps aren't part of the regular topic of conversation quite yet?
I think one of the most interesting, and again, it's maybe perhaps not always... it's not a new topic, Chrissy. I think it comes and goes in cycles, but it is how do we engage the missing populations? And what I mean by that is the kind of missing demographics that are not coming into your clubs and not coming into facilities. Now, of course, the GLP-1s gives us access to those that perhaps are overweight and or obese, and it gives us access to that customer. But the other customer, look at segments such as children. There's a huge obesity problem at the moment in children. How are we managing to engage them through services, facilities, programs, initiatives, and products that allow them to come out and education at the same time? In addition, the kind of baby boomer generation, those over 55, 60 years old, are we actually serving them really with the right facilities and products that they want to become involved with? And I think another one as well, moving on from that, is probably social health and well-being. And it ties into your point of creating that third space. Is that third space in terms of social interaction with friends and also with your gym base? Is it social interaction through the likes of co-working spaces that are adopting inside their facilities? So we're all social animals, some more so than others, as we know, Chrissy. But at the same time, I think any facility that wants to be seen as a third space has to have that stickability. So what does a third space mean? Is it co-working? Is it social interacting? Is it social fitness? Beyond group fitness, for example. Is it social rest and recovery? There's, for example, social bathing, social cryo, social saunas, social steam rooms. These are kind of facilities now that are kind of engaging customers to come back to their hotel gym, health club, gymnasium or studio, and maybe come for 1 or 2 visits more every single week. So I think social health and well-being and the engagement of the missing demographic are 2 trends that I genuinely hope continue in the future, because with them, I think our industry is stronger.
Yeah, was just last May, I believe, when the U.S. Surgeon General declared the loneliness epidemic. And to your point, we are not creatures designed to live that way. And yet within our communities, those natural and organic third spaces have really started to shrink. I live in the city of Vancouver, so you see those third spaces just get soaked right up for the latest development. So once again, great point that these health clubs, if you innovate in the right way, can become that for your community. And as well, to your point, it's going to mean that your members are engaging in your space that much more. And when you make it social, people like to talk about the incredible time that they had. So all of a sudden, from a marketing perspective, that word of mouth ripple effect or the social posts on social media can go such a long way. You're obviously a tremendous wealth of information within your brain because of the amount of people that you're able to keep tabs on in this industry. But Beyond Activ is the event where people are really able to share the ideas, share the information. So for those that have never attended, what can they expect from the experience? What's the flow of your types of events?
Yeah, look, we have to create an event or an experience that gets a C-suite executive, an investor, a manager, an executive to leave their day-to-day office and to travel perhaps far and away to come somewhere for 2 or 3 days. Now, when we build an experience around that, I think there are various faculties and formats we have to function into. One is thought leadership. And now thought leadership is basically content, I suppose, in the kind of day-to-day world. But the content has to be at the absolute front edge of where discussion is in the marketplace. And those speakers have to be the speakers that are innovating, investing, and adopting those technologies, practices, or services at that moment in time. So the content has to be really front end, and it has to be full of executives that are actually doing the work rather than just talking about the work. That's number one. I think 2 is peer-to-peer networking at the highest possible level. I think there are plenty of amazing events out there, and they're always talking about how many tens of thousands of attendees they have. And I'm not doubting that they are very purposeful for the marketplace. They're great for the consumer. We are a business and investment network, Chrissy. Our job is to make sure that at the absolute level of quality over quantity, that we have people coming to our events that are of real value. They're decision makers across the board, whether they're the key operators of businesses, whether they're CEOs of suppliers or technology companies, active investors, government agencies looking for advice and direction on future initiatives. That is the makeup of our audience. I think the other kind of third key pillar that we actually have is the kind of connectivity of it all. Do you have a platform or a network where true connectivity can happen? And what I mean by that is you have to have extensive networking breaks, extensive networking receptions. You have to have a team that is proactively engaging your customers before, at, and after the event in terms of introductions via email, WhatsApp, social groups, in addition to, of course, celebrating industry wins through award dinners and small-scale tabletops. Pulling all of that into one event, into that experience, is really what I think is the differentiator for Beyond Activ. There are other truly great events in the marketplace. We just happen to think of ourselves as sector agnostic. So we bring in the best of health, the best of wellness, the best of fitness, the best of hospitality and spa. We then overlay that in a multi-textured event with multiple networking opportunities and true C-suite networking. And I think that is Beyond Activ in a nutshell. So if you come to New York, I suppose you're going to find out that in the flesh.
Yeah. Are there any particular speakers that you are really excited that are going to be at this event in September?
Good question. I'm not going to highlight anyone in particular. I think at the moment we've got over 100 speakers. To give you an idea, on the hotel side, Accor, Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott are all talking and coming along. From the HLBP side and the gym club side, we've got everyone from Lifetime to Planet Fitness to Self-Esteem Brands, Anytime Fitness. We've got Saudi Arabia's biggest gym chain, who are the 3rd largest company in the world in our marketplace, Lee Jam, coming over. We've got Cult Fit, who are India's largest operator, also coming over. So the goal is not to create just an event for North America. It's a truly global event for anyone that wants to come into North America and experience all the innovation across the Americas continents. We've got 40 of the largest operators in Latin America coming up to share their insights and their investment strategies. And so I think overall, when it comes to, again, quality over quantity, it's about celebrating our industry, creating a platform for them they can grow from and learn from, and at the same time, making sure it is a meaningful event with a little bit of fun.
Yeah, just a little sprinkle of fun in there. And I mean, it is fun too when you have, like, I love that it is such a global perspective because exactly that. If something or problem that somebody is having in another market, they might have a completely different perspective that offers a solution to something you haven't even thought of in your own. And platforms like this really allow that type of idea sharing to happen. I know part of the event as well are opportunities to tour some locations in New York City as well. Why is that an important thing to integrate into the event?
Experience. Look, I think people are traveling a long way, whether it's interstate, intercountry, intercontinent. I think we're also trying to make sure that people have a flavor of what's actually happening in the marketplace. On the 19th of September, we will have a networking walk from the venue, the Marriott. We're going to visit the new Chelsea Piers Flatiron Club, which is a phenomenal business that just opened up this month. Looking forward to taking some of our VIPs around that club as a club tour. We're then going for a bit of experience in Soul Cycle. And so we're going to have a spin class there on the 19th as well. I'm looking forward to making sure people have a good sweat together. And then last but not least, we're actually going to Othership, which is their kind of new flagship US facility at Flatiron as well. They have the largest sauna in North America that can hold 91 people. And so these are facilities and experiences that I think just add an extra level of excitement to someone that wants to come to New York. They also celebrate everything that New York is doing and innovating in terms of the marketplace. And so we're very proud to work with these partners, and we're very excited to make sure our VIPs have just an extra something to take home with them.
Yeah, it's the thing I appreciate too. People practice what they preach. So without a doubt, you're going to have everyone on those bikes. It will be full and people are going to be competitive because I've seen it happen before. Obviously, New York City is just one event of many. So how do your other global events differentiate from what happens in New York City? Or do you kind of just take the same formula, but pivot it a little bit to those local markets as you travel?
Yeah, great question, Chrissy. I think for us, look, New York looks after the Americas. It's a great place for us to delve deep into the Americas marketplace. In addition, of course, there's not a lot of, shall I say, large-scale events into the Eastern Seaboard in the US. We can also put a lot of capital markets. So we're very blessed having it in New York this year. In Saudi, we have a huge event in Riyadh, and actually it was over 1,000 people came in February of this year. We had 50-something exhibitors and huge support from the Saudi government. In terms of Riyadh, we do bring in Europe, Middle East, and Africa into that event, and also get a lot of participation from the Saudi government as well. That is an incredibly exciting country to do business in terms of its people, its culture, and its ambition. It should host, touch wood, the 2032 World Cup. I believe it's the only bidder. And I'll be surprised if they also do not look to host the Olympics at some year, if not 36, then 40. They are all guns blazing for a phenomenal transition from their petrol economy into health, fitness, wellness, sports, and tourism. And we are proud to be in their corner. So I think Riyadh's a very interesting event. It has over 1,000 delegates and some amazing companies. When it comes to Singapore, we do dabble a little bit more in terms of employee well-being. That's a very interesting marketplace in Asia, especially in some of the kind of major cities in Southeast Asia. And we also take a lot of, I suppose, insight into the healthcare market. There's a real big buzz around Southeast Asia at the moment when it comes to preventative health. So how are healthcare providers, especially private healthcare providers, looking at integrating into fitness and wellness? The last event is in Sydney, and that looks after our Australasian marketplace. Sydney, Australia, is a phenomenally interesting market. It's not the largest market in the world. Collectively, it only has a population of about 30 million people. But in terms of gym penetration and club penetration, they are doing some amazing work. Anytime Fitness there alone has 550 clubs. There are dozens of people that have over 50 clubs as well in terms of their business and growing quickly. So I think as Australasia, a very exciting marketplace, even if it is a bit small. But to answer your question quite quickly, the same format, different players, slightly different verticals and different weightings across the marketplace, but we make sure that those marketplaces are active. Who's buying, who's investing, who's innovating. We make sure there are those fits.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear what those different verticals are. And just circling back to Saudi and that government support, can you elaborate a little bit about why this is such a pillar? I mean, obviously, you're talking about the economic shift, and they recognize that this can be an incredible segment just from a tourism perspective and for locals. But when we compare in Canada and the United States, I look at things like for the US, the FIT Act. In Canada, we got a pesky tax line trying to get more people to move. So how different is it from like, let's not make our people move and give them pills versus let's get our population more active?
Well, I think the Saudi government, led by the Crown Prince, has done an amazing job of prioritizing health and fitness and wellness. Now, he is quite a young ruler, and he's a huge advocate for sports and health and well-being. They've got targets internally to make sure their gym penetration goes from 3 to 5 to 7 to 10% over the next few years. And of course, one of their guiding missions is what they call Vision 2030. Vision 2030 is their kind of first economic footprint of when they unveil themselves to the international marketplace. At the moment, they're building some incredible, what we call giga projects. One is called Neom, another one is called Qiddiya, another one is called Sport Boulevard. These are, to a degree, multi-trillion-dollar projects. Another one is out in the Red Sea. It's called Red Sea Global. They're building a huge tourism development space out there that's bigger than the Maldives. They've got over 80 first-class hotels inside that being developed at the moment in time. Most of those are luxury and most of those are wellness-centric. So I think overall the population is young, it's hungry, it's ambitious. They've got a ruler and a government that really gets behind them with initiatives. They are very open to the fact that they do not have the expertise or the personnel to build this internally. And so they are bringing in a lot of external capability, foreign companies, foreign consultants, foreign workers, to strengthen that workforce, to really build up the capability for Saudi to grow beyond 2030. These projects are being built, are just unbelievable to view. And they're being run by what's called the Public Investment Fund. That is the PIF. That is Saudi's sovereign wealth fund, looks after all the investments coming from their oil and gas economy. So an incredibly beautiful country with incredible, beautiful people that is growing to dazzle the world in the next 10 years. And if you haven't been there, honestly, seeing is believing. You have to visit.
Yeah, I mean, you really sold it there, Ross, I got to tell you. But I've seen some of the renderings of some of those future projects that you mentioned as well. And it is quite astounding to see the shift and the change there. But, you know, I do wish that when we look at our governments on this side, that they were perhaps a little more enthusiastic about getting their population moving. But I think to your point and kind of where our conversation began here, getting the industry united under this one voice to propel these messages and emphasize the fact that the fitness industry really is part of this healthcare continuum and can play a tremendous role economically if we are able to get more people moving and living healthier lives. So lastly, Ross, we perked some people's interest. September, there is still time. So how can they connect and learn more?
Yeah, simply visit www.beyondactiv.com. You'll see a little pop-up there for an event in New York, and you can jump on board and buy tickets. And if you can't jump on board, sign up for our mailing list. It's all free. We've got some free e-zines popping out every single month, free annual report, and some really interesting podcasts you can watch as well. So if you can't make it to one of our events face-to-face, don't worry. We'd love to have you as part of the network. You can subscribe online for free.
Brilliant. And I'll make sure to have all those details in the show notes as well. Ross Campbell, I know it's a busy time with just a few weeks away, so thank you so much for carving out a little bit of time and space to share what you're all about today.
Chrissy, thank you so much. And again, huge thanks to you and the team at ATFW. You guys are doing great work and we are championing you on. I'm looking forward to seeing you in September in New York, but really pleased for you in the journey and we wish you continued success.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Chrissy Van. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.